Multiple AEW stars are apparently expected to jump ship to WWE, and maybe this would offend you, maybe this will bother you, but the truth is, it's always a good thing when talent jump ship, and we'll probably speak on that in just a little bit. But the big story that came out last night was that Powerhouse Hobbs was departing AEW at midnight, and WWE sources were expecting him to sign with the company. Now, this was very interesting because, well, Powerhouse Hobbs, he was rumored to have WWE interest for a while, but nobody knew when his contract ended, and nobody really knew if he would be leaving the company. If you follow this channel, if you're subscribed to this channel, you know that I went live and I gave my immediate reaction. And my immediate reaction is relatively simple. Talent sharing different locker rooms throughout their career is a good thing. It's a beautiful thing to see talent come and go. In fact, AEW and WWE, they have bloated rosters. And when talent decide to leave one company and go to the other, I think it opens up a breath of fresh air. I think that's essentially what is happening. Now, I personally enjoyed watching AEW Dynamite Maximum Carnage. There was some things that maybe they could have done without, but for the most part, it was a easy, solid watch. Maybe not the most special episode, but it had its good moments. And we saw the Rascals get a vignette, which we know they're leaving TNA. Again, it's part of the conversation that talent leaving companies is a good thing. Now, Powerhouse Hobbs leaving AEW isn't the only one. Now, Fightful came out with that report, and that's been amazing. But for the last several months, we've heard about Chris Jericho potentially leaving. Sounds like he's pretty much gone. We've heard about Anna Jay potentially exploring all options. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Anna Jay, by the way, her contract doesn't end until spring 2026. That was per Fightful. And that report came out last month that it was, originally reported her contract would end in the end of 2025. It was pushed back until spring 2026. And Anna Jay is expected to explore all of her options. That's at least what was reported. She has the intentions of possibly going to WWE, maybe going to TNA, hell, maybe even going to Japan and having an excursion over there. We don't know. But that's kind of the beauty of conversations like this, because when we hear a report about Britt Baker or Anna Jay or Chris Jericho or Powerhouse Hobbs, what is the one thing that wrestling fans do right away? They fantasy book. Now, maybe you guys aren't somebody who supports fantasy booking. Me personally, I do. I think fantasy booking is fun. I think it's fun to think of different matchups, different factions, different stories. And sometimes you get some really, really good theories. And sometimes you don't. And that's okay, because it's just fun. It's a fun activity. So when we hear of this news surrounding AEW and multiple talent jumping ship, I think a lot of people want to be upset about it. I think a lot of people want to be tribalistic. I think they want to have a debate on it and whatever. But the reality is, Powerhouse Hobbs, Anna Jay, Britt Baker, Chris Jericho, it doesn't matter who you list. We could sit here and say, oh my God, AEW fumbled them. And, I'm sure there's other content creators who would love to push that narrative. But I think naturally, leaving a company is actually best for business. And it's not 100% of the time where that's the case, but Powerhouse Hobbs has been utilized throughout his entire tenure with AEW. Whether it was Team Taz or the Don Callis family or the Ops, he's always been thrown into groups, but he's never been given the ball to run with as a singles guy. That's my issue. If there was one thing I can criticize Tony Khan on, I would say, hey man, you probably should have given him the ball. Tony Khan doesn't book that way. Tony Khan doesn't care to book that way, and he'll never book that way, and that's fine. That's how Tony Khan operates, though. But that would be my criticism. But I'm not going to sit here and act like Tony Khan didn't do anything with Powerhouse Hobbs. I'm not going to sit here and act like he fumbled him. I think he could have done more with him for sure. But him going to WWE, how do I know if it's better? I don't know. There's no way to know. What I do know is this, though. There's going to be fresh matchups. Britt Baker going to WWE would offer fresh matchups. Anna Jay jumping ship to WWE would offer fresh matchups. And listen, Tommaso Ciampa recently left WWE. Who knows where he goes? Maybe he goes to AEW. Maybe he goes to TNA. Who knows? But talent jumping ship to WWE or vice versa, it opens up doors that may have not been there before. And I think wrestling in 2025 was a valuable lesson to everybody that there needs to be some sort of shakeup. WWE definitely needed a shakeup. AEW definitely needed a shakeup. Hell, I think TNA definitely needed a shakeup. NWA, MLW. I think every company needs to do something different. There's other talent, by the way, in AEW who are rumored to jump ship. And, Danhausen was a name that got brought up. There's others. Private Party, we still don't know what's happening with them. Yeah, Tony Khan's solution could be simply booking them and utilizing them. That's probably not going to happen. The truth is, that's probably not going to happen. So if you're AEW and you're not going to utilize them, let them go. But for every time you let people go, bring in new talent. So the Rascals coming into AEW is something I've supported. I've said that in my channel in previous videos. But definitely something I'm excited about. Because fresh blood, fresh faces, fresh stories, it's so necessary. It's incredibly necessary. And I think you would be foolish not to agree with that. If you want to watch the same old thing every single week, what are you possibly enjoying? But that also brings us to another topic. And this is something that I was actually really happy to see Tony Khan do. And I thought maybe WWE, considering their relationship with TNA, maybe they could take some notes here. But Tony Khan revealed on social media after AEW Dynamite 3 new signings. And he revealed these 3 new signings based on dual contracts. Now, these have been rumored for a while. We have spoken about the idea of dual contracts with AEW. But Tony Khan did confirm 3 of them. Now, Mascara Dorada, he is joining AEW as part of a dual contract between CMLL and AEW. Obviously, if he's working AEW, he will probably work Ring of Honor as well, because CMLL works with both AEW and ROH. In addition to that, Hechicero, who's part of the Don Callis family, he's quickly becoming one of my favorites, by the way. He's enjoyable to watch. He's also now all elite, thanks to this dual contract between CMLL and AEW. And then we have Persephone, who is also joining AEW under this dual contract. Now, mind you, WWE has had a lot of interest, apparently, in Persephone. We saw what happened with her and Mercedes, and there was a lot of reports, and we don't know the validity of them, but there was reports that WWE was interested in bringing Persephone. We never saw that come to fruition, and now that can't come to fruition because she is officially all elite. Now, I don't know how these dual contracts work, but Tony Khan announcing these 3 new signings is a relatively big deal because, one, it sends a message to the wrestling world that their relationship with CMLL is incredibly strong, which is a good thing. I think CMLL has been doing some really awesome stuff in 2025, and now it's still relatively early in 2026, but I feel like 2026 could be a great year for CMLL. I think 2026 actually is going to be a better year just in general for Lucha Libre. Between what WWE is doing with AAA and what CMLL is doing, man, I think we're all in for a treat. So the good thing is with Tony Khan doing these dual contracts, it gets me excited to know that he's partnering with companies, but not necessarily screwing them over. Because if he really, really wanted, Tony Khan could take Hechicero, he could take Persephone, he could take Mascara Dorada. He could take them all and not do the dual contracts. But that would be a very big, big stab at CMLL. And I think maybe people may have misinterpreted what I've said in the past because I've criticized WWE for signing TNA talent. But I have also been very critical of AEW signing NJPW talent. And like Okada leaving leaving New Japan for AEW, like that's another great example of like I've been incredibly disappointed by some of those talents that are leaving New Japan and coming to AEW. And by the way, there's more rumored to join the company, but I see these dual contracts as a very, very good thing. Like I see these dual contracts as a way to savor and butter up your relationship with your partners without impacting them, but also getting the benefit of having them available for dates. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of logistics to that. I'm sure there's a lot of things logistically that make it hard. Um, you know, naturally speaking, that would make a lot of sense, right? But I think if you're AEW and you figure out the logistics, I think you put yourself in a position where not only do you have access to a great talent pool, but whenever you do want to do pay-per-views with the other company or storylines with the other company, you just have such a solid foundation that you're able to accomplish so much more. I really think WWE should copy them. Like we see Joe Hendry and Jordan Grace coming to NXT. Man, maybe a dual contract with WWE and TNA would be really beneficial. Maybe that concept could work. I don't know. And I don't know if TKO would do it. But with them wanting Leon Slater and possibly Mike Santana, and, I think those are all things you have to be pretty considerate of. And I think if you're WWE, you look at these dual contracts, you're like, hey, we're partnered with TNA, we're partnered with Pro Wrestling Noah. Let's do something there. Something to definitely think about. You know what else we got to think about? We got to think about TNA for a second. We know the Rascals have left TNA. They've signed multi-year deals with AEW. We saw the vignette, and I love the vignette, and I think these guys are all going to be studs in AEW, and I've said that throughout time. But now it's come out, the real reason why Myron Reed and Leon Slater is canceled. Now, a lot of fans immediately went to social media and started to blame Myron Reed and AEW because they've signed with AEW. But the truth is that, according to Fightful, wasn't anything to do with why TNA canceled the X Division Championship match between Myron Reed and Leon Slater. Apparently, it had more to do with the fact that WWE wanted to use Leon Slater for the UK tour. Now, listen, no matter how you cut it, WWE, AEW, you could point fingers at both companies, but the truth is, TNA is the one who's getting screwed here. TNA has canceled this match for their AMC debut. And I was looking at this card, and there's something about this card that's just really not intriguing to me. Like, I understand AJ Styles is going to be there, and I understand what they're trying to cook up, but something about this is not sitting right with me. And to cancel this great match, it's worrisome. And I don't even know if Leon Slater is actually part of the UK tour. We don't even really know what's to expect there, but the fact that Myron Reed and Leon Slater's match has been canceled is just absolutely mind-blowing. And it's also mind-blowing that Myron Reed was still willing to work the match because he was committed to that date. And it sounds like AEW wasn't giving him a hard time about it because, according to Fightful, they signed their deal early in January. But when I hear this news, I just have to sit here and wonder how TNA is going to manage this, because the truth is, as much as I love TNA, and I'm a big fan of TNA, I'll always be a big fan of TNA. I find it very difficult for them in this position that they're in. WWE is poaching their talent, so is AEW. Just last week on TNA Impact, there was that promo about Mike Santana and Kazarian leaving AEW and coming to TNA. And how does AEW follow up? They announced 4 new signings from TNA the day before they go live on AMC. And so whether AEW fans want to admit this or not, the truth is AEW definitely looks at TNA as competition. Which, by the way, is a great thing. That is like the most amazing thing that can happen in the professional wrestling industry. Because for AEW, the narrative of them losing to WWE, it's there. We can't change it. Unless AEW truly surpasses WWE, we cannot change that narrative. They are losing to WWE. But now the conversation won't be so much about them losing to WWE. I think wrestling fans online, the ones who are constantly online and tweeting and Facebooking and Instagramming and TikToking and YouTubing, yeah, I think they're going to start changing the narrative to, hey, AEW is beating TNA. Which, by the way, I would expect Tony Khan and his billions of dollars to beat TNA. However, what I find fascinating here is that TNA is now in a prime position where, with AEW and WWE taking their talent, they can start highlighting other talent. Like, Jake Something was somebody who should have been pushed on TNA. I will die on that hill. Like, he should have been pushing TNA. Why they didn't push him, I don't know. But I like the idea of him now being in AEW and tag teaming with Mark Davis. The Fatal 4-Way tag match, them becoming number 1 contenders, was actually one of my favorite parts of watching the show. And Jake Something and Mark Davis, for some reason, they just have this weird chemistry. It just works. But the reality is TNA is going to lose when it comes to contract pay. They're not going to be able to compete with WWE or AEW on that level. And yes, they recently re-signed Mustafa Ali, which is phenomenal, but they just lost Matt Cardona to WWE. They lost Jordan Grace earlier in the year. Hell, they might be losing Leon Slater. They just lost Myron Reed, Zachary Wentz, Desmond Xavier, Trey Miguel. Like, yeah. So TNA is in a prime position where they really got to figure it out. And they got to figure it out relatively quickly. Because if TNA really wants to do well on AMC, you are going to have to beef up your roster. And if you can't beef up your roster because you can't compete with Tony and TKO, then you got to go really hard with creative. And that means introducing new faces, new pushes, new concepts, new ideas. Your creative has to be there. You cannot rely on Dolph Ziggler, Nick Nemeth, Kazarian. You can't rely on Moose. You got to do some stuff that's fresh and some stuff that is new to the audience. But I love it because with AEW now recognizing TNA as like competition, going after their talent, two things are going to happen. And that's one, TNA will step up and figure it out. Or two, it's going to put TNA in desperation. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes when you are desperate, you are willing to take more risk. I feel like wrestling companies don't take enough risk. Consider that a hot take, but it's true. I think every company could benefit from taking a little bit of risk. WWE and AEW definitely don't do it, and if they're not doing it, TNA sure as hell isn't. So this match being canceled could actually be a sign of something good to come. Now you might be asking, what is that? So let's talk about it. Let's turn our attention to EC3. Now, if you guys didn't know, I talked about it a couple days ago that EC3 was leaving the NWA. And then all of a sudden on social media, EC3 has been posting videos which are really high quality and actually really well produced. But he's been posting videos teasing the return of the 1% gimmick. One that was made famous from him when he was in TNA Impact Wrestling. Now, the rumor is that EC3 is headed back to TNA. There has been no confirmation on this. But of course, TNA will be going live tonight, January 15th, on AMC for the first time. And we know that they've lost out on talent to WWE and AEW. It's a constant trend of what we're talking about. But the reality is this. TNA is also making moves of their own. So the idea of EC3 showing up on TNA Impact is actually a great thing. Quite frankly, I like the idea because what he did in NWA was good for what he had to do for NWA. It benefited NWA a little bit. I think it made people take NWA a little bit more serious. But I want to see EC3 in TNA. I want to see Braun Strowman in TNA. I want to see Matt Taven in TNA. Multiple people are rumored to be joining TNA. So we don't know what surprises they have planned for their live episode on AMC, but we do know with Myron Reed and Leon Slater's match being canceled, that opens the doors for something more. And so when I say that the card is kind of iffy, the card is kind of, it requires a little work. I don't think the matches will be bad, but I just don't think this sounds like a massive debut episode. But when you add the surprises, that's where the conversation changes. And the reality is TNA will get the most viewers that they get probably on the first episode. I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in to see, hey, what does the stage look like? What's AJ Styles doing there? What's the plan? What are the presentation changes? Is this company making any presentation changes? Are they making a change to the way it looks or the camera quality or the commentary team or the ring announcers or whatever it may be? People are going to be tuning in to see what TNA does. TNA has one very, very good chance to make a very good impression, but it's very easy for them to slip and fall. And EC3 coming into TNA is definitely not a game changer by any sense, but what it does give you is a sign that TNA is taking their roster serious and they're willing to implement some fresh blood. Isn't it kind of interesting as I talk in this podcast? A common trend that I keep speaking on is fresh faces for all these companies. Companies need to switch it up. Roster shakeups need to happen. So while a lot of people definitely get mad and angry and upset and they're tweeting, they're just like, they're doing all that on their phones, voicing their concerns and their opinions because so-and-so left the company or so-and-so joined another company. I look at that as a big win. And EC3, by the way, coming into TNA definitely helps TNA from a roster standpoint. They need fresh blood. The idea that Braun Strowman could come into TNA, Adam Sure, yeah. I think a lot of people kind of wrote him off a little bit from pro wrestling, but he could go into TNA and actually be an asset. See, the thing is, TNA is not going to sign Will Ospreys or Mercedes Moné or CM Punk. Hell, they might not even sign Chris Jericho, but what TNA will do, and this is the thing that I appreciate so much about TNA, is that they tend to figure it out most times with people who may not be the most popular or the most recognized. And they have a great roster. So EC3 is definitely an added benefit to the show. Braun Strowman, Matt Taven, they would be all great assets. And by the way, we just saw the Righteous get signed by TNA as well. And they're going to be obviously competing at Genesis. So I look forward to seeing what EC3 could do in TNA if it officially happens. I look forward to seeing what these other guys could do if they officially join. But it's not just that. I also have this excitement for what TNA could be doing because I think TNA, whenever they've had their back against the wall, especially under the Anthem era, they somehow are able to figure it out. And with them being on AMC, I'm hoping wrestling fans take them a little bit more serious. Tribalism's not fun, bro. It's not fun. It's kind of boring. I think the comments and the live chats when I'm doing live streams and I see the tribalism, you just tend to see that a lot of people are miserable and they're hate watching or they're trolling, one or the other. But it's a waste of time. None of these companies are perfect, and honestly, they're not going to be. But they're all doing something cool. They could all be doing cooler stuff too. So tune in, watch, see what happens. But EC3 would be fun to see how he evolves. I feel like EC3 has a lot to prove to the wrestling world. He's not the most exciting in-ring wrestler, but he's a great storyteller. And he's definitely not bad in the ring. Okay, and that brings us to our final topic in today's video. Ladies and gentlemen, we should probably have a conversation about Logan Paul and what he teased. And I'm going to keep this brief, but for those who missed it, Logan Paul dropped a new video on YouTube, and there was like some behind-the-scenes stuff with WWE 2K. Wrestling fans immediately noticed that the WWE logo and the 2K26 logo was the classic WWE logo, the scratchy WWE logo. And a lot of people thought, okay, this is probably some sort of spin from the Attitude Era or Ruthless Aggression Era. A lot of people were curious about that because they were like, hey, why is WWE using it? Now, WWE and 2K, they do things on purpose. And obviously they knew with Logan Paul making this video that this would be seen. But there's two things that really should be talked about here, which is one, who's probably on the cover, and two, what is the plan for WWE 2K26? Well, first and foremost, WWE 2K25 was a huge success. The word going around the streets right now is that CM Punk will be on the cover of the base 2K26 game, which would be really logical. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. And of course, they'll have their super editions or whatever they end up doing. But yeah, the idea that Logan Paul leaked the WWE logo also means there's probably a spin of the Attitude Era. Now, keep in mind, in WWE 13, CM Punk was on the cover, and that led to the Attitude Era being prominently featured in the game. So if you connect the dots, CM Punk being on the cover this time, something to do with the Attitude Era, I think that's a very big thing. Now, for me personally, if I'm giving you guys my 2 cents, I just have to admit it. I'm tired of nostalgia playing off of the Attitude Era. I wasn't a big fan of the Attitude Era. I've always said this. I think the Attitude Era, from a booking perspective, always kind of sucked. I think there was too many DQs, too many non-finishes, too many countouts, which made sense because at the time, Vince McMahon was trying to sell pay-per-views and stuff. But I think at the end of the day, the Attitude Era, I think people love the nostalgia of the Attitude Era. But if you watch the Attitude Era, you can see a lot of flaws within the shows. Now, on the other side of things, I think it would be much better if the game is based off of the Ruthless Aggression Era, because that's one of my favorite eras in professional wrestling. So ultimately, it looks like WWE 2K26 is expected to air some sort of commercial. There's reports of a commercial airing soon. We know that they filmed stuff in December of 2025. So WWE and 2K clearly are getting amped up. Makes sense with the timing of the Logan Paul video that dropped on YouTube. It is very clear to me that WWE, they know what they're doing here. And I think we'll see what 2K does. I like playing the game here and there. And I think I wish I had more time to play it. I definitely don't. But I think we're kind of in a position where, you know, the game is going to be dropping in a few months. WrestleMania is almost here. It comes out around WrestleMania season. We're going to get new characters in the game. I'm sure they're going to have special plans for story mode and things of that nature. We'll see kind of how they go about that. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they do. I'm not going to lie. I'm excited to see what they do, how they come through, you know, what their plans are. I feel like video game companies have definitely, it's kind of like Hollywood. I think in recent years, video games have definitely been dying. And I think for WWE, you know, it's a great thing that 2K is successful, because for WWE, that means they're successful. But we'll have to kind of wait and see what gets revealed, what gets announced, that sort of thing. But of course, I'll be paying attention to it and I'll keep you guys updated. So a lot of things happening in professional wrestling. This is the channel. So make sure you guys click subscribe. Help us reach 100,000 subscribers, and I'll see you guys next time.